Well, thank you everyone for coming to the Friday episode of the 2024 LPNC Candidate Livestream Blitz. We may or may not be live right now, having some technical issues, but if we're not live, thanks for watching the recording. We got a fun range of candidates tonight, a little bit of a local flavor in the race, and we've got a federal candidate as well. So why don't we take just like 2 minutes, introduce yourself, tell us the race you're running in, and then like a 20-second pitch as to why voters should vote for you, and then we'll get into a bit of your campaigns later, one at a time. So Dr. Stephen Feldman, why don't you go first?
Gosh, yes. Yeah, I'm Steve. I'm Steve Feldman, running for U.S. House of Representatives in North Carolina's 10th Congressional District. And my goal is to bring civility, balanced spending, get rid of the deficit, and a more peaceful outlook on how we treat people, both here at home and abroad. I'm a dermatologist and a researcher at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem. And you should vote for me if you like those ideas and if you educate yourself first. Look at the 4 candidates in my race. Check out their websites. I think you'll see I'm probably a strong candidate that may well be more in line with what you're hoping to see.
Excellent. James, why don't you give your intro?
Sure. My name is James Bledsoe. I'm running for Raleigh City Council at large, which means if you live within the city limits of Raleigh, you can vote for me. A little bit about me. I'm a 19-year Army combat veteran. I used to be a tanker, a Cav Scout, jump out of airplanes. Now I just hunt for landmines and IEDs. Very fun job. You don't need good knees for that one because you have to go really, really slow. Reason why I'm running is because crime is on the rise. We've hit historic, actually new records of highs for rape and human trafficking in Raleigh. Spending is out of control. We've got a $2 billion of debt that I'd love to tackle, and a lot of city mismanagement going on. But also, I'm the only combat veteran in the race, and I'd like to bring that expertise, or 20 years of expertise, to the Raleigh voter.
Excellent. Thank you. Brian, why don't you take a couple minutes, introduce yourself, tell us the race you're running in, and then a quick little pitch why voters should get to you, or should vote for you, and then we'll jump into your campaign later. All right. If we can't hear, I'm not sure if we can hear you, Brian.
Is that better?
Now we can hear you. Excellent. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. No, I'm Brian Lewis, and I have been involved in environmental activity, conservation activity for decades now. I served in the United States Navy, and as soon as I got out of the Navy, which was right after Desert Storm, the military shrunk so quick there was nowhere else to go. And I got to see a lot, from the military side of things, how rights and what we presumed to be rights were not managed well, and environmental rules weren't necessarily followed as adherently as we would hope. So that was something that really got me involved with environmental issues. And then as I grew in the environmental community, I began learning more about the structural problems that we see, how we design systems, how we design the environmental rules that are around. And you find that there were people who were writing rules to benefit a desired outcome, and those desires weren't focused on the environment. They weren't focused on people's health and well-being. They weren't focused on caring for our neighbor. So the values that we all focus on, and we see how the law is the place where those violations occur. And I began tackling it from that. Was very active in the Sierra Club for many years, and had always been politically active. I became a soil and water supervisor back in 1997. I became a soil and water supervisor. I served for 6 years there, dealing with water issues in Broward County, Florida. There we were dealing with Everglades and ocean. So we have beautiful reef on the east of us, and pristine Everglades to the west of us, and developers who really just felt that those were things that were in their way. With that, it really brought me to a point of learning systems. It got me involved in agricultural production and farming. And I have since started my own farm. So I live on a farm here. I enjoy, I talk often about reducing my food miles. But back to my political side is, I don't believe in beating people over the head with a stick if you don't do it my way. My way might not be the only way that we can fix problems. And so we need a system that allows that dynamism to occur. And the Soil and Water District is really this ideal mix because it involves voluntary compliance. The Soil and Water Districts do not have a regulatory power. But what we do is coordinate community resources and help homeowners and property owners and farmers, business owners, and even residential development areas manage the water resources and soil resources that they have, all through voluntary compliance. And when I talk about it often, and I could go on for a long time,
we'll
I
there,
won't do
worry.
that to you. I won't do it to you now, but I really do see the Soil and Water Conservation District model as this ideal form of community working together and for one another. And that's why I'm always, you ever start me on an environmental conversation, you just turned on the engine and away it goes. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is I've shown over decades my care for people, my care for my neighbors. My neighbors don't even have to believe in the same things that I believe in. They're still my neighbors, and I still love them, and I'm going to care for them. And the Soil and Water Conservation District is a way that we do that from that root value of making sure that we live in a clean and safe place. And we do it lovingly, not with a heavy stick.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for that. Let's jump in first with Dr. Steve Feldman. Back for more. You already been here once this week, but glutton for punishment, I guess. So you're running for a federal office, but you're out campaigning on a person-to-person level. What are some of the challenges and things you've learned from having to try to represent so many potential constituents? How has that impacted where you're campaigning?
Yeah, I do get out some, but my wife wants me to get out more, spend more time shaking people's hands. And I'm thinking, gee, what I need is more time on television. If I could, as a dermatologist, generate, a few $100s in an hour, then get the message, use that to get the message out on TV. Nowadays, it might be more efficient than shaking hands and going door knocking and stuff. I think if you're, and James, you could correct me, I think if you're even running for Raleigh City Council, that's a lot of people. That could be more than a congressional district now that I think about it.
Oh, yeah.
You'd have a hard time knocking on enough doors to make, to collect a lot of votes.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. All righty. Let me ask a question here for James. You're running for the large district of Raleigh City Council, as we just went over it. Mm-hmm. You're currently the chair of the Veterans Party of North Carolina while being a member of the LPNC. Mm-hmm. And with all of these different inputs, coming from the Veterans Party, the Libertarian Party, your background, whatnot, can you tell the people listening a little about why you decided to run?
Why I decided to run? Well, again, there's two big issues that got me into this race this year. After doing it 3 times before, and the Army taking me away for a few times, especially one time being deployed, I thought I was done with it. But in November, as I tell folks, 2 big events happened. One, my house got broken into. My house didn't just get robbed; it got ransacked. So whoever broke in probably knew me and decided to be as disrespectful as possible, stole a few things. I'm glad I had a good response, but from the RPD, they got there, in a decent time. But again, my safety was violated, and it goes along with the rising crime in Raleigh. The second thing was the Veterans Parade got canceled. as I've been serving in the Army for 19 years, I've spent 2 years of my life overseas in the Middle East. And from Afghanistan, Kuwait, Iraq. I was supposed to go to Syria until the Turks invaded. So seeing this level of disrespect come from our city council, I thought they would just hone it towards police officers and firefighters, but then they set their sights on us. And the amount of disrespect I've been given from the Raleigh City Council, and even their supporters, has been tremendous. And we just can't have that, especially 2 years in a row now. The Veterans Parade has been canceled, and that has to stop. So, again, I'm not just endorsed by the LPNC or the Veterans Party. Literally every third party in the state has endorsed me, minus the Green Party. And, of course, the Dems, because they don't endorse unaffiliated anymore, because I guess that has burned them a few times.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, Steve, why don't you take just a minute here and tell me what your motivation was and why you decided to run?
Oh, yeah, it's easy. I've been suffering from chronic dissatisfaction with federal deficit spending. And I've been represented here in Winston-Salem on and off by Virginia Fox, who, I'm sure she wants to cut the deficit, but in her 20-some years in Congress, there's not once been a balanced budget. And, legislators like her talk about, we got to cut the deficit until their side goes into power. And even under a Republican president, Senate, and House, they just balloon the deficit further. And so there was that chronic dissatisfaction just putting me on the edge. But then there's all the violence that we see our government supporting, both sides of our government jumping over each other to fund killing in other countries, that I think just makes us less safe, despite on top of the immorality of it all. It's I'm Jewish. I grew up in Hebrew school. I collected dimes as a kid to plant trees in Israel, and it's horrible to see Israelis killed, and it's horrible to see Palestinian families being slaughtered too. I think we need to find peaceful solutions.
Excellent. Thank you. And then, Brian, I know you got into a little bit, but what was your motivation to run for Soil and Water?
So I live in Wake County, so I'm here in the Raleigh area. I'm actually in what they refer to as ETJ of Raleigh, and what I've seen here is, in a previous campaign and me having my farm in my unincorporated pocket of Wake County, that Wake County is in a position that I've seen historically. I've seen it in the past. I did mention I was the supervisor to the Soil and Water Conservation District in Broward County, Florida. And I saw a place where the developers really had the keys to the city, and there was nothing that really got in the way. I actually just went downtown this evening with a friend of mine who's a professor from state, and looking at the amount of infill traffic. Right now there's a conversation of taking the Red Hat Amphitheater to move it somewhere so that they could put more density, more residential spaces in there. And one of the conversations that doesn't get had is, these folks are going to be demanding resources, and those resources fall on the community to provide. They like to say that the impact fees cover them, but they really don't. And the math doesn't pan out for impact fees. And the city planners and developers are really after higher densities, and they're not overly interested in those of us who actually produce food. I run more on the hobby side of farming, but we have some main scale producers here, and it really highlighted and got my attention when we were during the shutdown, and we've had a couple of shocks since to the system where the supply chains that we have created are so broad, and the market doesn't have the resilience that it needs to handle those kinds of shocks. And yet we're surrounded by farms. We have over 65,000 acres of farmland in Wake County, and all of it is under pressure to be developed in creating higher density, while we're still struggling to figure out, all our food is coming from a desert on the other side of the country and being flown in from other parts of the world. Lots of folks have a lot of environmental concerns that we discuss, and food miles is one I like to get into. But that conversation currently in the county isn't including that balanced and whole community approach. How do we create a sustainable economic model where we support our local farmers and they're providing the goods and the services that we need? And we're not doing it through regulation. We're not doing it by saying, sorry, you can't build something, but rather to make it economically viable that they do and they can. And that's, I think, the most important part is we don't solve these problems by creating more rules to tell people what they cannot do, but rather that we create an economically viable community that looks at its rural, its agricultural, and its urban sides, all in balance, and look at them together. So me having sustainable farms in my local community is something that I've so much loved about living here and watching them under pressure and losing the battle to development, not because the development by itself is the problem, but that farmers are not staying in business because their markets aren't viable. And that's what I really, really want to focus on. And I could get into plans, but I could drag. I love this stuff. See, I get really excited. And Steve, I know there was another guy that we knew that got really excited. I'm that guy. And so, and so, you could get me on a roll about these things, and I sometimes try to be careful to reel myself in. But at the end of the day, making sure that we have urban communities that are worried about the environment can actually address them, and farming communities have the support that they need so that they can be viable and stay in business.
Cool. I'll keep on that line of talking there. You said you were in the ETJ, the extraterritorial jurisdiction, and that you're outside the actual city limits, but the city still controls you a little bit. But you're going to run for the county level, and so the fundamental thing about libertarianism is property rights. So how would you, as a libertarian who is also in control of rulemaking and whatnot, how would you balance property rights with your job as soil and water management?
Well, as I'd mentioned in the introduction on that, the one thing that I really like about the Conservation Corps, which is the origin of the soil and water conservation districts, is that they're non-regulatory organizations. You can come up with some ideas. Those ideas are basically on the table for others to come up and ask for assistance to do the right thing on their properties. My goal is to have a program that says, hey, you don't want to have silt, you don't want to lose all your topsoil, you don't want to have areas you can't farm or produce on because your soils wash away. Well, great, we've got wonderful experience, and we have access to experienced people, and here's a program, and we'll find the support necessary to implement these solutions for you. But by no means does the Soil and Water District have the ability to walk onto somebody else's property and tell them what they're going to do, but rather to walk up to their front door and say, if you're interested in solving that problem, give us a call. We're here to help you. And then we walk away and they file the application. But we have to make sure we let them know what kind of assistance is available. And we use various tools through the Army Corps of Engineers and the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and the whole breadth of what services are provided. We're the ones who take on the responsibility of delivering those services versus telling people they're going to take those services. That's why I think it's actually a great model for government.
I'm left wondering if restrictions on density within the city limits is what pushes suburban development taking over farmland.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a great segue because so obviously Brian is going to be respecting our property rights, but James, you're running for City of Raleigh,
Mm-hmm.
City Council, and they famously have quite a few zoning restrictions, and it affects housing affordability and density and everything else. So how would you get it so people could build on their own land, fight some of the over-regulation, zoning restrictions, how would you implement some changes in Raleigh?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I always tell everybody I am in strong favorability of build by right. What you do on your land, as long as it does not impact anybody else or your neighbor, I'm in favor of you doing whatever you want on that land. If you want to build a farm, a small little farm on your land, go right ahead. If you want to build a small little additional dwelling unit or a large one, go right ahead. As long as it's not affecting your neighbor, then hey, fine. But as far as regulations go, I also tell people I'm going to go in there with a machete or some blunt instrument, not a sharp one, just a blunt one, and just start removing regulations is what I would like to do, especially with the team of Republicans that I'm running with. We understand that there's a lot of restrictions in Raleigh of what you can't build. Like if you wanted to start a fast food business or if you wanted to start something like that, and you had a location built downtown that was brand new, you could not put in a drive-through window because of their environmental policy. They think that having, if they get the cars to stop idling for just a minute, then that's going to cut down a drastic amount of CO2 emissions. And if they get rid of the certain type of stove in Raleigh, then that'll also cut it down. But again, that just shows how far they're willing to go to make sure that you cannot operate your business how you want. Even before this council came on, the previous one would say, no, we can't have any more density. We can't allow mixed use. We don't want you to build this. Even over by Crabtree. I mean, in me being an engineer with Army Corps of Engineers, when someone says that, hey, we can't do something because we can't build that way, I scoff and utter disgust. I'm like, that lacks human imagination. You show me a problem and I'll show you some human ingenuity to not only tame the environment, but also make it work for us and help the environment. They've blocked off Crabtree from any more construction. Of course, they'll maintain, but you can't build anything new over there because of the flooding. From housing to business, I want to deregulate. I want to cut as much red tape as possible. I want infill in Raleigh, and I want mixed use, greater density, so that way people don't have to drive as far. They can walk around if they want to. But then again, I want everybody that lives inside of Raleigh to be able to do what they want on their land.
It makes me wonder if they should have drive-through lanes for electric cars.
So would you support that at the federal level, mandate that everyone has to have the drive-through at the electric vehicles?
No.
So on a serious note, though, right, we were talking about local property rights, but you're running for federal office. So what are some big things that you might support getting government out of people's lives that you can control from the federal level?
I'd like to get our military out of the lives of people in other countries. I think we should defend our own borders and maybe cut our defense spending down to something more reasonable, like the sum of what China and Russia together spend, as opposed to the sum of what the next 9 countries combined spend. I'd like to see healthcare costs. I'm a doctor, but I want to see healthcare costs reduced dramatically. And I think the way to do that is with high deductible health plans or other approaches that encourage the people who are consuming the healthcare to take into account the cost of their decision making. Right now, they don't. They leave it for regulators to do it for them, and nobody wants that. We doctors think patients should have a right to whatever care at whatever price, and that's just a recipe for excessive costs. To begin with, but let's just start with something really easy. Let's just give Americans back the freedom to buy their drugs from wherever they want. I got patients who could get a generic drug from Canada for like 1/10 the price of what it costs here in the United States, and they don't have the freedom to do that. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
As a type 1 diabetic myself, I'm sitting here looking at the cost of my insulin and my sensors and everything else and thinking, this has to only be expensive because of the FDA. So, or regulations. So,
Yeah, so you're not thinking that what we need to do is to have more government regulation, more control of insulin prices, huh?
yeah. Well, as we all know, we're all good economists. If we put a price ceiling on there, we'll just cap prices and it'll be fine. So, or not. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know what?
Yeah.
I was going to say, one of the interesting things you find with that market calculation, is you recognize how much of the world negotiates their nation's prices relative to the peg on the high end of the U.S. price. So every incentive exists for our price to be unreasonably high because it gives them the maximum profit when they negotiate it with another country. So if you know you need $5 per unit of something, and somebody says they're going to pay X% of the highest price, then our price goes to 25%. Their price sits at $6 or $7, and we're paying the crazy price, and we're going, gee, we want to pay what they pay, but their price was pegged and negotiated against our price, which incentivizes the market. Not so much that they care that we're paying 25, but that they couldn't get the price negotiated out of country. And that level of behavior, in many other cases, we would consider that to be market manipulation. And there are a lot of rules in place about market manipulation. So if half of our various drugs that are out there are with trade partners who are turning around and negotiating against our price, there becomes a question over that being allowed. By simply allowing overseas trade, it undermines their ability to isolate us into that pocket, and everyone goes and buys it, and it ruins the ability of the market to manipulate itself, which means it's actually a free market then. So we do need that foreign purchase power so that we can stop that market manipulation that forces us into prices that are way above production cost. But that's why they're above production cost.
Right, absolutely. And we have a certificate of need law system in North Carolina. It was one of the things that was actually so bad it was gotten rid of at the federal level, but we still have it at the state level somehow. So, Steve, I don't know if you want, it's not directly something, but do you know what that system is? Would you want to explain it to the viewers?
Yeah, there's a surgeon here in Winston-Salem who wanted to offer MRIs to his patients at dramatically lower costs than the local hospitals were offering at. And so he bought an MRI machine, and the state wouldn't let him use it, wouldn't give him the certificate of need, basically because the hospitals locally, as I understand it, said that we don't need another one, and got the state to block it. That just keeps the cost of these things really high. But at the same time, I believe in market forces. I think the advances in electronics and televisions, in phone technology, and all the things you can buy at Best Buy, the quality just keeps going up and up, and the prices keep coming down and down because consumers look for the highest quality at the lowest price. When people are trying to get an MRI under our current insurance system, when someone else is paying for the cost of the MRI, they just go and get the MRI, and they don't ask, well, who's got it for a lower price, unless they have a high deductible health plan. We need that kind of market force driving people to ask for who's got the lowest prices, so that there'd be competition and bring down the costs. And going back to that certificate of need stuff, eliminating the certificate of need issues requirements would allow new people to come in and compete again with higher quality, lower cost services.
Yes, and that's a North Carolina General Assembly thing. So if you show up on Sunday evening, I'll be talking as the candidate instead of the host, and I'll start railing about all of the NCGA items. So let's go to a softer touch here real quick. And you've all been out there campaigning. I'm sure you've all been meeting people. What is something that on a personal note kind of touched you during this campaign cycle? I'll start with you, James, if that's all right.
Let's see here. I mean, again, this is my fourth time running. So the best thing that has happened so far is the fact that so many parties have reached out to help. I mean, the fact that you guys have allowed me on this, this broadcast, I'm greatly appreciative of that. The Reform Party, the We the People Party, just all the other parties have been helping out greatly. I certainly wouldn't get the outreach that I've had without you and the GOP. They have certainly helped out a lot with that, but also the volunteers of a lot of offshoot groups that are not quite Republicans, but they sort of are. That small little group of UNAs that are almost Republicans but not. They've been really great. They've helped me out a ton. They put me on all their voter guides, and gotten the word out there. Put out signs for me. One of my volunteers has put out maybe over 400 signs for me personally, and I love that.
Yeah, the help you get from volunteers is also pretty. It's often pretty touching, and I know there's been people putting out 1.5 million Bob Drock signs. So it's not just you. The Libertarians throughout the party have done a great job helping out, and I'm sure all of our candidates appreciate that. But Steve, did you want to tell a story or something?
Sure, I want to tell a story about two voters that I talked to. One, a young woman who, who thought I was in the wrong place on abortion. She believes that her body is her body, and I should trust her to make decisions regarding her body. And she convinced me she's absolutely right. And then the other voter I talked to was a young woman who thinks a fetus is a baby and thinks that the government should not condone murder, period, at any age of gestation, even if it's just a single cell, because it's a human being. Even if it's one cell, it's got all the DNA for a human, she said. It's, from her perspective, she's absolutely right, And, as a libertarian, I really do not think the government should be controlling women's bodies, period, And, we libertarians say you do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting somebody else. And murdering something that somebody thinks is a baby is, at least in their mind, hurting somebody else in the biggest possible way. And so you've got these really good people on each side, just really good people who have great motivations. And I think this is a model for all the conflicts in the world, that we're not dealing with good and evil. We're dealing with good folks who see things from different perspectives, from different lenses. And personally, I think we have to find a balance between these two folks who, if you listen to either one of them by themselves, it's just totally opposite extremes. You watch TV channels, the TV channel for one says those people want to kill babies, and the other side says those people want to control women's bodies. I don't think anybody wants to control women's bodies. I don't think anybody wants to kill babies. I think we need to get together and try to come up with, reasonable, well, there is no reasonable compromise between two positions like this, but I feel like we have to compromise anyway. At least that's my belief.
Well, that leads perfectly into my pivot into abortion. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, one of the things that I saw campaigning with you is that you are someone who can talk to everybody. Doesn't matter who you are, young or old. And speaking of putting new perspectives on things, you certainly blew my mind and when you were doing your magic tricks at the state fair. So that was pretty good. But yeah, I think the thing you're touching on there, right? How do we manage two people who are deeply held on both sides, and for a lot of the issues, getting government out of the conversation would probably help just a little bit. So that's a great point. Brian, did you have any stories you wanted to share from this or your previous runs?
Yeah, one of the things I enjoy dearly, and it's something that I've done my whole life in a lot of spaces. I was formerly, I grew up in a pretty low income, rough neighborhood in North Miami. And I kind of grew up with this idea of everyone around me was somewhat in a homogenous mindset of what government should be. And I said, well, I don't want to be like this. I want something different. And the only thing I had knowledge of in that as a teenager, was a very binary option. So I went to the other side going, well, no, I want to be, the guy who's well off, the guy who has money. So I want to emulate those behaviors. And that was how I kind of pulled myself up to say that I wanted something different. And it really wasn't until a lot of the activity in 2009 where I came across this guy, this Austrian economics, Ludwig von Mises, and I was like, this is amazing. This is exactly what wow. And met some folks who had gone to Mises at one of the rallies we were doing in 2009, and suddenly started recognizing there was some party resistance. And I was very active. I was a committeeman of another political party down in Broward. And that was my turning point in this. But from that time all the way till now, the thing that I enjoy the most about just speaking with anybody is that wherever they're coming from, we respect where they're at, we understand what their positions are, and we say, well, I do care about those things. And so I can talk to somebody who comes up to me and says, and I may have once been a guy who was active. I was a member of the Sierra Club for many years as a leader, and somebody I know used to put stickers on the back of excursions that from Utah Phillips: the earth is not dying, it is being killed. And those who are killing it have names and addresses. I may know that person who would have done such a subtle protest. And on the other side, people going, but if the economics aren't there, it can't happen. And I agree with that 100%. And so I spent many, many years finding where that space was. And so here I sit now running for soil and water conservation, and I can go up to somebody who's conservative and I say, I completely hear where you're at, and you're right, and this is how we have to support these models. And I can go to folks who are out there who are concerned that, our activity is causing dire harm to the planet. And, my positions may be a little more nuanced than that, but I know how to have that conversation with somebody where we respect and we're heading in the same goal. We want the same things. And when I walk up to somebody who I know, on one side it says, no, you're just as environmental wacko. I used to enjoy, actually, I had a Prius, the first Prius that came out. And I'd show up at my political party meetings and he would say, everyone would be, oh yeah, he's our environmental wacko. And then I'd go and show up at my Sierra Club meetings and say, oh yeah, he's our right-wing nut job. And I was that guy in the middle. And I find myself in that space a lot. But I enjoy being in that space. It's where I want to be, because I think that's where everyone come here, come to the middle, and let's have some conversation about what are real problems and how we solve them together, looking at market forces, looking at the things that'll make it work so it happens, so we can really fix things, so we can really help each other and really live out that creed. There's a phrase you'll see, any email I ever send, you'll always see it's part of my time. Sign on there is a Hebrew phrase called tikkun olam, and it has gone through iterations of understanding over the generations, but it's a long existing Hebrew term that generally means to heal the world. And some people think of it in this more new agey way, and some people think of it in a more tangible way, and I'm probably more to the more tangible way. We should walk in the world the way that we would expect the world to be if it were perfect. I'll fail, I'll fall short, but at the end of the day, we love one another and we care for one another. And there are things that need to be fixed. We can't say that, nope, that's not a problem, forget you. No, there really are concerns and there really are problems. And market is, economics is a real science. It's not made up, it's not phony, and it's not hooey. Economics are real. And if we ignore them, then we can't do the good things to help one another. And I get to have that conversation when I campaign, and watching people's hearts soften and watching people recognize that there is a space where we can move together. That's the most rewarding part of campaigning ever. And it's what I do regularly and I love to do. So, and I get to do that almost every day while I'm campaigning, and I bring up, I'm running for office, and it starts that conversation. So
Excellent, thank you. All right, so politicians love to make fantastical day one promises. Just today, Trump promised to free Ross on day one, which I hope would be a good thing. But he's also promised to do crazy things like end the war in Ukraine and Israel in one day in just a snap of the finger. Unrealistic, but maybe, hopefully not. But if you guys are elected, what is something that, tangible, reasonable day one policies that you could do? We'll start with James and then work our way up to Steve at the end.
Certainly. So tell everybody, the one promise I can keep is to meet with people. Our current candidates, I really don't see that they're doing any monthly meetings or hosting any monthly town halls. I mean, they'll have one every once in a while, but that's my campaign pledge, is to host a online and in-person town hall event each month for the citizens of Raleigh so that they can come and voice their concerns. I mean, it doesn't cost anybody anything except for me to host the event. And also on day one, this is in writing, I will be donating 100% of my pay to high school students going into the STEM and the trades in Raleigh. As long as they stay here in North Carolina to go to their schooling, they can qualify for this scholarship or grant. And that's my day one promise.
Excellent, thank you. So, Brian, what's your day one promise?
Day one promise is to reach out to our agricultural producers and get a pin on what their biggest economic pressures are that make them question their business every day. We know what a lot of those are. One of them that I have focused on, even without being in the office yet, is getting our grain producers the correct facilities to accommodate for human consumption food. North Carolina has a lot of bias towards animal production, and we've lost just in the last couple of years a lot of storage for human grain production, and it's been converted for animal feed, and their standards are different for those. We need some human quality food mechanisms and market pieces in place to support them. I want to know what their biggest pressures are. I know what they are for the grain production. I want to know what they are for the vegetable production as well, and find ways where we could use resources that are available to fix those problems. And that's day one. It's actually prior to day one because I'm already doing it in the grain market.
Excellent. Steve?
Yeah, so aside for submitting a bill to give Americans back the right to buy their drugs from whatever country they want, what I would like to do right from day one is to establish greater civility and transparency. So I'd like to, take some Democrats and some Republicans out to dinner every night. Being a libertarian, I won't have to spend every night hitting donors up for money like major party candidates probably have to do. So I grab a few Democrats, Republicans, go out to dinner, bring a journalist along with us, talk about the issues of the day, starting with trying to balance the budget, and see if I can bring people together to do that.
Eat local, Steve.
Yeah, you can bring them back to your home office in North Carolina if you want to. Alrighty, a couple more questions. I'm going to ask one about coalitions. So James, you'd mentioned that you were endorsed by, let me try to remember, Libertarian Party, Republican Party, Forward Party, Veterans Party. Am I missing any?
The Constitution Party, We the People Party, and it's better to say which parties I haven't been endorsed by than to say which ones I have. So, I mean, the only ones that I haven't been endorsed by are the Democrats because of their party bylaws, and then the Green Party because I'm not a socialist.
So how has that actually, affected how you campaign a little bit, right? You're seemingly getting a big reach from a lot of people. Mm-hmm. How do you parlay that into votes?
I'm telling folks exactly what I just told you. I mean, I've been endorsed by everybody but those two parties. If everyone can come to an agreement that, especially on a statewide level, that I'm the best candidate for Raleigh, then I might deserve their attention for 5 seconds, or at least, hey, here's my handout, just give it a read. I mean, my big thing is cutting spending, putting money back into safety, and essentially getting government out of people's lives and reducing the cost of living, and that perks their ears right up. And as soon as they hear that, they're like, okay, well, so Republicans call me libertarian. I'm like, I assure you that we differ on certain philosophies where, I mean, like a Venn diagram, I bleed into a little bit of your camp, I bleed into a little bit of theirs, but here I am as a constitutionalist. That's what I tell people too. It's like, hey, I'm a constitutionalist, an orthodoxist. That's where I lay my hat. I venture into other people's camps because I agree with all these other policies. So, for this is the first time I've actually had Democrat volunteers too, which has been phenomenal. I was just at Chavis the other day, and the Democrat Party was there, and they were letting me stand right next to them, and they even gave me a nice little soft open, like, hey, I'm going to go introduce myself, and then you can go hit them with your spiel or give them your card. And it worked out great. So, I mean, Democrats are noticing that what's going on right now isn't working, and seeing that there's an entire coalition behind me, that certainly has a few of them noticing, to say the very least. You're on mute, Ryan.
Nearly made it the whole time. I spoke on mute earlier, but Steve made a comment. It flowed perfectly, but this time I got caught. So thank you. Brian, have you, along the same sort of lines, have you worked with any coalition of maybe it's different parties or it's different producers or anyone else? Have you looked at building coalitions? Have you tried to build any coalitions? Have you seen any coalition of producers, etc.? Tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, one of the most important things is to break these ideological walls, and I spoke about it briefly a bit there. Well, probably not briefly if it came from me, but I really enjoy the idea of saying I can solve this problem that we agree exists, but we have to use these laws of nature and economic laws if we're going to make them happen and make them happen successfully. And by doing that, and by softening those, tonight, actually, earlier today, I was en route to a meeting to meet with some folks who, to address what our environmental concerns are, we need good science coming out of our campuses. We need our academia really engaged in recognizing. And I'm going to tell you one of the things I really enjoy about NC State, and I'm a father of a junior undergrad at NC State, and I do enjoy the linkage that exists between the marketplace and the students, that they are growing towards their place in the market, not growing towards an ideological space that won't integrate in the market, because then it leaves them unemployed and idealistic and feeling shied. Whereas by being integrated in the market, my daughter has already worked in the field that she's studying towards. Her internships have been directly linked and related and are part of her education. And so in that, approaching the staff at our academia, where they're integrating these sides. Yes, we want to solve these problems. We want to ensure that our soil and water resources are the highest quality they could be, as one TV commercial may say, as nature intended, and that we would move in that direction. And we need to be teaching our students that that is an attainable goal. And we do this by bridging these people, and I'm actively doing it now, and I'll actively do it as soil and water supervisor in Wake County, and hopefully be able to use that pulpit to say, hey, academia, have you talked to your students about this part of this issue? Have you given them this comparative analysis, or have you avoided it? And those are important conversations to have. And that's how we bridge the coalitions, by being able to say, hey, this is why people oppose you. Maybe you should teach in that direction. So.
Absolutely. So, Steve, you're running for Congress. Have you had any chance to build coalitions or meet any voters of other parties or voter groups or anything, and how are you working across party lines to try and get some votes?
Yeah, I think one of my friends reached out to me after driving through our neighborhood and was, you know, he pointed out something I thought was very cool, that as he's driving up towards my house, he saw one of my yard signs in the home, along with a bunch of Trump signs at that house. And then as he drove up the street, on the other side of the street, he saw some more of my yard signs, along with a bunch of Harris Walls signs. I mean, the most right side and the most left side both had my signs up. And I think it's because, you know, the policies I've suggested are pretty common sense, and they don't denigrate people from either side. And I think there is plenty of room to bring people together. The Libertarian Party organized a nice event online with me and the Green Party candidate, one of the Green Party candidates in another district. And we talked about our shared desire to see peace in the world, and our shared, it's not unusual for people to have a shared desire for peace, because I think everybody wants peace. But what was interesting is we shared a similar approach to getting to peace, which was to be peaceful.
Excellent. So that was an appearance by who's that, James?
So this is my latest puppy. Her name is Persephone. She's our newest Rhodesian Ridgeback.
There you go. Alrighty. So I think this is going to be our final question, and I'm going to give you guys some time to tell us about yourself after this question. So don't worry about that. But let's see. So tomorrow is the last day of early voting. So you can work the polls tomorrow. Then you have a break from Sunday to Monday. There's going to be no early voting. But how do you guys plan on doing the last couple of days of your campaign? How do you plan on spending the time and maybe reaching out to voters if you can't go to the polls on early voting? Steve, why don't we start with you, just since you're top of the ticket?
Yeah, my biggest event this week will be participating in a Share the Health Fair, where I'll be doing skin cancer screenings on people and doing a little bit of volunteer time at our downtown health clinic. And then I think there's a pumpkin festival in Statesville to attend. That sounds like good times. And then maybe I'll get a chance to take my wife out to a movie or something.
There you go. It's been a grueling event, and we're almost over, almost finally done. But there is a couple of days respite there. So, Brian, how do you plan to spend the last couple of days?
You know, I still run a farm, and a farm requires a lot of work. I've coordinated with some of the pumpkin patches in town, and every year at the end of the street side pumpkin sales, my goats get the benefit of the leftover pumpkins. And nice enough, a pumpkin gourd will last a couple of months, so that'll get me through the winter as a supplement in their feed, along with beer grains that they get. Well, I got the call tonight that my pumpkin guy was going to try to do one more day. Well, he's got to be off the property by morning. So when we're done with this, I'm going to be loading pumpkins in a truck and bringing them back to the farm and unloading pumpkins. And then when that's done, at around midnight, I'm finishing off the last of my signs on the east side of the county, the municipalities that are out to the east, and we have some farm areas. So I'm going to be doing that at about 2 a.m. And then for tomorrow's Shabbat, I'm sleeping in. That is my day of rest. And then, you know, for me, it is going where people are and making myself known. And I've been very humbled by people reaching out, going, "Hey, I wanted to verify that was you, because if that's you, you only have my vote, but I've already told 20 other people to vote for you." And you know, it is absolutely humbling. And I think to anyone who's ever run this process, It is humbling to have tens of thousands of citizens who, if you're voting for one of us, we weren't your alternative pick. We've worked and we've gone out and we've made our names known and we've labored to get those. And, every candidate, whether you agree with them or not, really have. Some of them are getting it because of a letter next to their name, but those of us here, we've worked hard to do this, and it is humbling to see the response. It really is. And so I go where people are. I introduce myself, and I just talk the way we're talking here. And these are things we have to love one another. We have to care for one another. And we have to respect that each other has opinions, and how do we bridge those? And you start doing that, and you start showing how it can be done, and people get excited. And seeing somebody get excited that we can make a market function, and actually we don't need to do certain things because the market will function. We can make improvements. I find that just amazing. And so I know there are 3 different festivals tomorrow that I'm going to swing by in the afternoon. And then Sunday, I'm going to be working here at the farm. I've got several to do. I still got to milk goats. So, that's an effort into itself, being a goat farmer.
Excellent. So, James.
Oh, and I have a boys group on Sunday. I do a boys group that I mentor. And so we have our Sunday meeting. So I got that too. So I stay busy.
There you go. James, what about you? What are you planning to do the last couple of days of the campaign season?
So tomorrow, it's going to be a very, very busy day for me. I'm going to try and hit some early voting sites, but I've also got to get some homework done. Yes, I'm still going to school. I'm doing cybersecurity right now for certified ethical hacker. So I've got to get just a little bit more done there before midnight. But also I've got my fiance are getting married in June next year. So we're having a celebration tomorrow.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Muzzle.
Thank you very much. So we're having our little celebration. We're getting the family and about maybe 80 other people involved for our other announcement celebration. And we'll have a nice dinner over at her parents' house along with a lot of other folks. But past that, I'm just going to get ready for election day, get some signs ready, go out to and get them ready for the voting day.
Excellent. Do you guys think that Nancy Pelosi is going to be out there volunteering or doing some real work tomorrow? All right. We'll go ahead and close it up here. Thank you for everyone being, understanding with the technical difficulties. But James, since we went to you last, why don't you keep going? Tell everyone where you can be found, website or socials or whatever you feel you need to say to close.
Certainly. Again, my name is James Bledsoe. I'm running for Raleigh City Council at large. You can find my website at electjamesbledsoe.com. That has my Facebook and X profiles on there. Feel free to reach out to me through the website contact if you want to keep it more private. I'll answer any questions through there. I look forward to your vote. And I'm at the top of the ballot. I do help tell people that I am at the top of the at-large ballot. You can vote for 2, but I ask that you only vote for 1. Thank you.
Excellent. Brian, what would you like to tell the voters to close it out?
There's a lot of work to be done to take care of a community, and the most important thing is that people go out and they vote, and you vote your conscience. You don't vote. This isn't a horse race where you're betting to who's going to win and who's not going to win. You vote for who you really believe in. Because by seeing it in the poll, by seeing how people respond, it steers the elected officials to know what you want as the voters. And we really have to do that. I am blessed to be in a nonpartisan position. I get to have these conversations at a broader scale, which I enjoy. But at the end of the day, vote your conscience. Please vote Brian K. Lewis. That's how I'm listed on the ballot, and you'll see my signs. There's a couple of folks with my same first and last name, so I had to throw the middle initial to differentiate. And I, too, am at the top but I'm at the very bottom corner of your ballot because soil and water is the last thing listed on your ballots in Wake County. So to everybody who's in Wake County, Brian K. Lewis, you can find some of my information at lewisfornc.org, and feel free to reach out. You'll have links to my email there, and really more important than anything else is love one another, care for one another, and vote like your life matters, because it really is. Your community is online. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I'm Steve Feldman, running for U.S. House in North Carolina's 10th, and you can find me at stevefeldmanforcongress.com. But I'm not going to ask you to vote for me. I'm not going to ask you to tell your friends to vote for me. What I'd like you to do is to look at the websites for all 4 candidates in my district. Tell your friends to look at the 4 candidates. Be an educated voter and pick whichever one you think is best.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, you can find more information about all of the LPNC candidates on lpnc.org. And we've had 2 Wake candidates, so you could check out wakelp.org as well. And again, you can check out all of the candidates' websites. And thank you all for showing up tonight. It was great. I believe one more episode tomorrow, Saturday, and then our final episode on Sunday. We may end up having a election night live stream, but we'll see how it goes. We'll all be enjoying our own little parties. We'll have to find someone to host it, but keep an eye out. We might be there. And for tonight's show, thank you all for coming, and we'll go ahead and call it a night.
Thanks,
for
Ryan.
having us.
Thank you, Ryan.